because he's one of the scholars who have followed and analyzed with the closest attention Movimento 5 Stelle, the Five Stars movement, which is a political party in Italy that is frequently prone to what critics call conspiracy theories. So I'm very interested to listening to what he has to say about it, and I just read the long title of this presentation, which is "One Hoax to Rule Them All, One Hoax to Find Them, One Hoax to Bring Them All, and Pseudoscience on Them," which is, of course, very nice.
Good afternoon, thank you all, thank you Professor Leone and the organizing committee for inviting me. That's basically my presentation. I would like to introduce you to quite an interesting shift we are living, social researchers, from the social research paradigm to the data intelligence paradigm. Then I would like, but I think I will go very fast to this because Professor Quattrociocchi did a great job and a very interesting presentation about the big data analysis of Hoaxes. And then I would like to introduce you a sociological framework and a case study, which is the conviction of the scientists, the Italian scientists, for the 2009 earthquake in L'Aquila, you may probably remember. And then a happy ending. But this was meant to be my agenda before this. Because yes, it was clearly a penalty, and this is actually wrestling, not soccer. And I think that Blaise Pascal was right. And this is the end of my presentation. This is a great conspiracy, but I don't have time, unfortunately, to go into the conspiracy theories in sport. I will move to my presentation, and as you may know, we are living in a period in which social research and methodology of social research is merging with business intelligence. And when I'm talking about business intelligence, I'm talking about tax mining research, for example, strategic planning and decision-making made on big data analysis, sentiment analysis, and so on and so forth. So we are living this merging, but I think Lewis Carroll saw this far before me and the big data analysts. The problem still remains the scientific method, or in general, the process we follow to address what is not true, but at least reliable, trustworthy. And I will argue that this is quite complicated and it's not very difficult to state. Then, as I promised, I'm part of a team of computer scientists and sociologists, which is addressing the new issue of big data analysis on Hoaxes. And these 8 slides are taken from the work they did. Of course, it's full of examples of stuff that is on the internet, so it must be true. It must be true. For example, the vaccines cases, the Obama cases, the NASA. We are trying to modeling an idea which is an idea of new social vector, because of course we need to have a theoretical point of view and that we can model, because today's instruments let us model almost everything. The point is that we need to try to explain why we think the social actor is like that. This is just an example. For example, we could try to state that a social actor is someone who can move in a very fuzzy function from a believer to a fact-checker through a function which is a function of verifying the fact. And then we can we can hypothesize that, for example, the social actor can be something that it's in the middle between the believer. Of course, we are talking about what Max Weber thought us were ideal types. From a believer to a fact checker, we can hypothesize the role of a susceptible one. And then we can divide a general and hypothetical community between gullible people that can almost take for granted everything and skeptic. And that the role of these two ideal types is not fixed. It's not, it's dynamic and can change over time. How? Through social communications, for example, through living in a society. And then we should, and this is my last variable to be explained in such a model, we should also consider that people can remember or forgive. Forget. And I could have fact-checked something, and after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I can forget, and then I can go back and become susceptible again. So it's very complex because it's something that is dynamic, as the web is dynamic, as life is dynamic. So it's very complicated. This is just pictures about dividing the web populations on Twitter among those who consider the vaccines harmful, potentially harmful, and those who are on the mainstream, on the science mainstream, for example. That's about the chemtrails, folks. And so on and so forth. The chemtrails as segregation index very close to 1. It means that they almost do not have any link between the two communities. But let's talk about the case study I would like to introduce you in today, and before to the sociological framework I used to study and go into this case study. I will do it very sketchy. Just Wright Mills in 1942. He writes a paper which is called Motivated Actions and Vocabularies or Motives. It's a very interesting point of view. Of course, it was quite looked down when he came out with this paper. Now it's one of the most important pillars of sociology of knowledge. And he talks about the motive. What is a motive? It's a sort of pre-packaged answer to unexpected things. When do motives occur? They occur when acts are somehow frustrated. You have expectations, and life and others make these expectations frustrated. So let's move to the L'Aquila earthquake in 2009, and let's ask ourselves what kind of frustrations happened. And we have to put this kind of frustrations on at least 4 social dimensions. The first, society. Why society? Because Italians, it might sound strange and weird, I know, but society, Italians trust science more than the EU 27 average. So when scientists, a group of scientists, tell you that there's no danger on staying home, even if it's quite 6 months that the earth under your feet is shaking. It might be frustrating if after only 6 days the big one comes. Of course it's an issue of trustworthiness and expertise. Are they saying this because science can do mistakes? Or are they saying this because political power, for example, economical power, are somehow lobbying scientists to cope with risk management in risk public assessment, for example? And then the second dimension. The second dimension is the one about scientists themselves, because it was since the time of the Galileo versus Catholic Church that the idea of a process against science was not put at the forefront. Then I will skip on politics because it's too complicated, and I would like to draw your attention on the media and their role on reproducing science and pseudoscience. I will try to mix theory and evidence. It's a sort of match between these two guys. We will go into more details in a couple of minutes. First, let's talk about the recipe. Media, science, and pseudoscience. The recipe might be this way. From the one hand, the media are still representing science as a set of dogmatic truth. But on the other hand, there is an increasing number of evidence situations in which the media represent science and scientific facts with the same strategies they use to cover politics. Alarmism, spectacularization, hypersimplification, and so on and so forth. So, we can briefly try to go into this sort of supermarket of the expertise, which is developed like that. On the one hand, an overexposure of people, actors, social actors, who have no evidence about CV, publications, being part of a scientific team recognized by some institution, and so on and so forth, to be part of a scientific community. But they claim to be on the public debate, and very often they result more appealing than institutional scientists. So it's not only, but it's also a communication issue. And then it's the trade-off, it's the controversy between science and science communication and science dissemination, and pseudoscience, which is rhetoric, simplification, overinterpretation, to go back to Eco and to his semiotics. What happens? At least two big theories can explain this, and I use both. It's the answer to the question, what kind of strategies do media implement to talk about science and pseudoscience? The first, I call it the par condicio, which is quite, it should ring the bell to Italian people, because it's the idea that science can be always represented as perfectly divided into two parties, even when science community inside is not at all divided, or the weights between the two parties are quite different. So the lay public sees that science is simply equally divided, and both the parts are legitimate to talk in public. And the second effort, it's the winnowing effort. It's an effort that has been hypothesized in the public communication literature since 1990. And I tried to apply it to science communication. The idea basically is each expertise community has a set of rules, of standards to select within people who aim at becoming an expert. These rules can be not good at all, can be not perfect, but they exist. And with the winnowing effort, the set of rules is completely changed because of the media. The new criteria are the criteria like being able to stay on the telly, being able to have a blog, being able to be attractive when you talk in public, being able to make relationships with lobbies and so on and so forth. This is exactly the case of L'Aquila. Because in L'Aquila, the media, the Italian media, were not able at all to find this kind of two parties inside the seismologist community. Because it doesn't exist one single seismologist that is open to admit that earthquake can be forecasted. So how they managed with this absence? They fall back on, and I'm quite near to my conclusion, Mr. Gioacchino Giuliani. Gioacchino Giuliani is a former technician. He's not a seismologist, he's not a professor, he's not a researcher, but he has all these traits, and I'm not going to read all, because you can read by yourself, but this made it very appealing for the media. And what about the match? The boxing match. The fighting match was on the Italian prime-time program by Bruno Vespa, Porta a Porta, with a special focus the day after the earthquake, in which, let me do some semiotics, I'm sorry if I'm not so precise, but the intentio operis. The intentio operis was exactly the idea of the winnowing effort, to represent a match between a seismologist and an alternative seismologist, who was not a seismologist at all. It doesn't matter. And he said, I have forecasted the earthquake so that my family slept outside yesterday night, and we are safe because of that. Is it appealing or not? The text-context relationships. It was the day after. So the public was sympathetic with a man from the same territory who was struggling to help his people. And then the other roles in the play. The host, some politicians, they were all with the non-mainstream scientists. With what effort is my conclusion? Uncertainty. On the very short time, this produces adherence. People believe it's true. In the medium and long term, this produces uncertainty because pseudoscience cannot give you answer, can give you hope, a temporary hope. But, as you remember, I told you about an happy ending, which is, what is my happy ending? My happy ending is this. The complexity of this new phenomena requires us, as semioticians, as social scientists, and computer scientists, to unite It's not a political appeal, it's real. We need to cope and come together to elaborate theories, because the theories we have now are not able to address all the questions this kind of new, in brackets, new phenomena are bringing to our attention, and to squeeze sense out of narrations in the big data era. And with this kind of happy ending, I kindly thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Tipaldo, for this very insightful and also very colorful presentation concerning a case that Italians know very well, the case of theories and conspiracy theories circulating after the earthquake, terrible earthquake of L'Aquila. Are there any questions or comments?
Quite difficult to look at you to speak here. So you were speaking about rhetorical aspect a little bit between science and pseudoscience. I think there is a lot of rhetorics which is very important, and there are some studies not on conspiratorial thinking but on transmitting scientific concepts by metaphors. So did you make any observation about metaphors? Maybe also for the earthquake of Aquila, I don't know, but I think this is something really important, not only for conspirative thinking, but generally for transmitting science to non-scientists.
Yes, you're right, and the use of figures of speech is very common in science, and it's not, in fact, it might be misleading to think that rhetorical speech is something that is up just to pseudoscience, because science itself uses metaphors and so on and so forth for trying to disseminate its knowledge. And I came across by chance this huge and very interesting field of study when I was in Nottingham 2 years ago, because Brigitte Nerlich is one of the most important sociologists in Europe and across all over the world about the study of scientific knowledge and metaphors. It was very interesting to talk to her. Then I had to choose, of course, what kind of perspective give to my study, and I tried to apply the logic of big data and business intelligence, content analysis to these cases. But yes, I found metaphors more often, not so much in the L'Aquila cases, but in other cases we have been studying, for example, the stamina cases, the stem cells cases, and the Movimento 5 Stelle. The Movimento 5 Stelle is probably the most important basket of rhetoric, and of course those scientists who try to stand up against the kind of communication strategy, they had to use by themselves other metaphors to compete at the same level. So it was very, and I think this should be one of our aim for the future is to try to understand and experiment somehow how machine learning technologies can begin to understand, how to recognize semi-automatically these topics.
Thanks for your very interesting example like the upgrade, I think this brings us to a very important question. I mean, the question, what is a scientific fact? In my opinion, a scientific fact is always like socially constructed reality. Like other socially realities, it's always socially constructed. And in many conspiracy theories, you don't have this clear differentiation between believers and scientifics, but you have scientifics and scientifics with different opinions. And I think most normal people don't have the possibility to decide which fact is real. And I think this is one of the main reasons why conspiracy theories rise up, because so many people can't decide. For example, the 9/11 conspiracy theories. There are so many aspects where you have scientists, like in the it's a group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and they say there was something wrong. And on the other side, you have scientists with the complete with other opinions. So, okay, I have to close with a question. What do you think about that?
Okay, so I have another hour to address your question. I would call to help me Thomas Kuhn, Karl Popper, and Umberto Eco. Thomas Kuhn explained us how science works. It might be arguable, but I think it's quite important, and it was quite useful to understand the difference, for example, between the revolutionary period and the normal period. And I will use Popper and Eco to better understand which is normal and revolutionary and which is pseudo. For example, the fact that Eco used Karl Popper and falsificationism to ask people who have to interpret text not to be too much enthusiastic with details that don't make a system and a body of evidence, not just a single trait. This could be not a positive method to say and state and differentiate and award what is a good theory, which is real good science, but at least can help us to exclude what is not systematic, what is not recognized by scientific, and maybe it could be in the future, but as Kuhn says in his book, but this can be a good method to make some difference. Then the people. Of course, I cannot expect my students and lay public to have read Umberto Eco, Karl Popper, and Thomas Kuhn. That's the challenge, and that's the reason why I think scientific institutions are stepping down from this Olympus they were in the past and try to do their own communication strategies. I think this is not a definitive answer, but can be a starting point to be a reliable, a consistent, and always present sender on the new communication fields, and to confront with those I would say non-orthodox facts and knowledge.
Thanks again for a very interesting talk. This is, in a way, a follow-up question, I think, because the term believer and belief keeps coming up. And I think when it comes to conspiracy theory, there are really these 50 shades of conspiracy belief. There are people who really have a conspiracy mindset and who are willing to react on that and I don't know, form social groups and so on. But there are also these people who just buy into a conspiracy theory because it's entertaining, fascinating, and so on. So who are the believers in your study?
the believers. Of course, they are very diverse. As a sociologist, I've been part of different teams. We made surveys, we made focus groups. Who are the believers? I need to answer with this kind of statistical samples I observed in my research activities. For example, the ones who believed a lot of things that are not true at all in the waste management and the waste heating treatment, the incinerators, for example. And they were very diverse. There were people from the Movimento 5 Stelle. For this kind of subsample, for example, I can say that they could be briefly described as over-interpreting people. They are systematically disappointing what Eco says about not being too enthusiastic in the isotopies. They systematically filter everything to just have a confirmation on their position, and it's a reaction not to the content of the message, but to the aesthetical part of the message. It's a reaction to metaphors. It's a reaction to a capacity to be sympathetic by the speaker, for example. But Grillo was able in 15 years to make people be ultra enthusiastic when he was destroying a PC during his on stage during one of his plays, and 4 years later he said that the computer was the only thing that could save us against politics, against lobbies. The message, the content was of course clear contradiction, but the strategy and the aesthetical part was the same, and people reacted exactly in the same way, sympathetic and believing him. Of course, this is just a subsample. There's people who have tried, for example, to become scientists, and they didn't manage. Now they are trying, for example, to be an expert thanks to the web and to the social media. So it's a sort of two-step flows of communication, for those who remember. They are aiming at becoming opinion leaders against the mainstream, but before they try to be part of the mainstream. These are just two ideal types. I think we can detail 10 or 20 types. I think in proportion they are the widest part of public higher study over these 10 years.
First of all, also thanks from my side. Very interesting presentation. I was also torn a little bit in between the position of sociology of knowledge and maybe Kuhn's perspective that there are these paradigm shifts and revolutions within scientific developments, and that oftentimes, even today, or more than ever today, I think, within science there's ideological biases. And I was specifically thinking about this par condicio she mentioned, that it's being used within public discourse to validate or actually delegitimize one argument to position pseudoscience on the other side. And there, I myself am not really decided, but I guess one point of orientation might be to look at the ideological starting point of science, and also actually name it and be self-reflexive about it, like where am I standing, which position am I speaking from, and the position, or the actual example I was thinking of was, for example, the climate debate within the US, where, for example, on the one side you have an overwhelming majority of scientists saying climate change is real and man-made. Then you have certain interest and lobby groups financing research in the other direction. We're saying, no, it's just one version of the truth. Actually, it's not so clear. And just because that is out there already, that changes the mindset of people in politics that can be made or cannot be pushed through. And yeah, I think this ideological questioning of the starting point of research is maybe a good point of orientation for that. I forgot the question part also.
Yeah. In the meantime, I was trying to go back to the slide I skipped on during my presentation, because I think that to your non-question, the non-answer can be partly this slide and the right part of the slide, because the climate change debate, it's not a real debate inside the scientific community, because we try to weigh the difference within the scientific community. It's more than 90% with the broad change against less than 10%. I think 10 is too much, probably. Who says that there's no empirical evidence? But what about creationism and Darwin? Poor Darwin. And why is it happening? It's happening also because it's not a monistic position, but because of this has been called by some scholar in the social sciences, scientization of policy. What is scientization of policy? It's this tendency to cancel public debate from a democracy, from a society, and public debate means conflict, controversies. So it's difficult to deal with and to cope with for politics and for economical interests. And how? Trying to find empirical evidence that can confirm your position. This is made with mainstream science, but when political, financial, economical interests are on the opposite side of mainstream science, they have to find someone and something. And it's basically the idea. I cannot let society debate, or I cannot say, okay, evidence says that, and we have to rethink our economical paradigm, our mobility paradigm, our capitalistic paradigm. We try to say, if mainstream science is from outside, okay, this is the data, and this is the empirical evidence. And if it's not, we try to find someone, and we say, okay, at least it's 50-50. So who knows? Okay, so we can debate. Okay.
Thank you for this very lively presentation. We had a small anecdote to tell. At the Potsdam conference, we tried to make a sort of discussion roundtable with citizens. And the problem was that we had all these fancy findings, but we had one lady who was a follower of the chemtrail. We would call it conspiracy theory, she would call it science or whatever. And she accused us of actually preventing her from gathering with friends and other citizens to discuss these things. And we were kind of unable, with all the fancy data, to explain to her that we're not actually doing this, that we're just keenly interested in disseminating what is a conspiracy theory and what is not. So I'm wondering about your opinion, how we would tackle this, what you called Olympus of knowledge, or the ivory tower. Thank you.
Wow. Who's got ears to hear? It's quite difficult to talk to someone who doesn't want to listen and understand. It might be technocratic and paternalistic to insist, which is the main mistake science and the scientific community is still making, even if they are changing somehow. But from a sociological point of view, which is more interesting, is try to understand why it's happening. And the answer is a mix between what Bauer tell us about the pseudo-religious approach, the quasi-religious approach, and to the charismatic leadership from Max Weber. I'm sorry, but I have to go back to my experience. For example, in the Movimento 5 Stelle, when we came out last year with our study, it was taken from one of the most important online newspaper in Italy, and they put our study online, and we got in 1 hour, 2 hours, more than 2,000 comments of people telling you will die, be careful of your car, and we did not say anything about the Movimento 5 Stelle is bad, Beppe Grillo sucks. It was just the idea to understand how it was born and developed over time, and trying to forecasting, thanks to sociology, the way they will probably be going. The kind of very strong, passionate answers come from the idea that Beppe Grillo was saying, for example, 1 is equal to 1, but it was the stop. It was quite like, Jesus. It's the example of a charismatic leadership. And people who believed to chemtrail. When I was last month with a professor of physics here in the University of Torino, I was trying to address the chemtrails issue, and he said, this is below the pseudoscience level. I can discuss pseudoscience, but chemtrails, it's less than magic, and I can discuss everything. This is the position of the physicians, but why people believe in that? People believe because of many things, but the main reason is that, first of all, we are thirsty of sense. That's why we need semiotics and semioticians who help us in better address the sense-making of this process. And then, because people, and Tocqueville was one among the first in the 19th century to teach us as a political scientist and a social scientist, people gather and need to gather. They look for reasons to gather, and they need to share sense. I know that I'm too much semiotic, so I stop, but this is basically in 2 words why this happened.
Can you mention that? Well, thank you for your appeal to semiotics. And from a semiotic point of view, what I tend to underline is the fact that, as we know from Gramscian theory, for instance, or structural theory, narratives usually have a sender that is this abstract function that actually initiates the action in the narratives itself. And the problem with the scientific discourse is that it is a discourse without a sender. Evolutionism, for instance, does not have any sender. So many alternative narratives are generated in order to insert a sender into those narratives. A typical one is intelligent design. Intelligent design is an attempt to introduce a sender in a narrative that has no sender whatsoever. And the same goes for the earthquake. In the case of the earthquake, there is no sender. People die, people have their relatives dying. At the same time, they cannot identify not only a culprit, but also a sender behind it. And it is much more appealing to believe in scientific says that actually there are some bad scientists who prevented us from knowing what would have happened and that the earthquake would occur. So I see a big problem in the fact that these two macro discursive genres, on the one hand, the senderless discursive genres like the scientific discourse, and on the other hand, the senderful discursive genres like mythological discourse, religious discourse, magic discourse are actually blurring, and are blurring in a world where I think another main problem is that there are no communities of reference anymore. In the past, there would be a religious community on the one hand, a scientific community on the other hand. Umberto Eco's method itself, which, as you said, relies a lot on Popper's philosophies and epistemology, works only in the case in which there is actually a community of interpreters that can distinguish between theories that can be falsified and theories that cannot be falsified. But what happens when you cannot distinguish the boundaries of the community anymore? Where is intersubjectivity? That's why it's interesting for us to discuss about Umberto Eco, but also with Umberto Eco, because his theories were probably suitable for a period in which the feeling of a discursive community still existed. I'm not sure it exists at the moment.
Yes.
Sorry for the
No, it's true. It's true, and I can just add one thing that, as you were talking, I go back in my mind with one of the key reading I made as a student that opened my mind more towards a philosophical approach, which was the last sphere of Peter Sloterdijk, which is exactly addressing this thing in a cosmological approach, that this is the last sphere. The Earth is the planet where people discovered during history that there was no a perfect system above us, it was just imperfection. But we still ask as the most important thing for our lives to can go back and fall to a system of sense. And when we discover that it doesn't exist, we have to invent, to represent. We have to try to feel our back covered by something which is safe, which is secure, which is warm,